Awesome. So I think that's all going. So hi, Michelle. Thank you for
Hi.
joining me. I'm Louise Hopkins from the Space Reclaimers. So we are doing our back to school workshop over the 3 days. And Michelle is kindly agreed to speak to us today, which Michelle is a speaker and an accountability coach. She believes the idea of work-life balance has set up to fail and that life is about ratio, not balance. So she helps women get clear about what they want and then make a plan to get there. If you'd like to learn more about this, you can check her out at michellecarre.com. Did I say that right, Michelle, your last name?
Yeah, Michelle
Yep,
Carre. Yep.
perfect. Cool. Yeah, so thanks for taking your time today.
Yeah. Happy
So
to be here.
thank you. So just a couple of questions. So first one, we'll just get right into it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Precious. So I know goals are something you talk a lot about with your clients. How can we help with our kids to set goals?
You know, I think the first thing is to look at their age. Obviously, we want to set age appropriate goals. But with what you're doing in this workshop and helping families and people to get organized for school and stuff, sometimes what we can do is use our expectations as goals. So let's say they have learned some of your fabulous organization tricks for, backpacks or homework when they get home or where to put stuff and store stuff. So set goals as our expectations is basically saying to your child, okay, when you come home from school, one of our goals is to make sure that we unload our backpack and put, maybe there's a system for, like you said, capturing homework or, forms that have to be signed. So let's empty our backpack. Our goal is to empty it. Make sure we put all this stuff where it needs to go, our lunch kits, paperwork, homework, all that good stuff, and then hang it on the hook or wherever they're supposed to put it. And when we make that a goal, I think what it does is it helps our kids to, one, follow the expectations that we're setting for them, but goal is a word that is very commonly used, and it gets used more and more as kids get older, and especially in adulthood. So if we start using that word younger, one, it also helps them feel like they're part of it, whereas an expectation is like, I expect you to put your coat on the hook, put your backpack, and empty your bag. Where goal, let's have a goal of trying to empty our bag, make sure our backpack gets put away, and doing all this other steps that we have to take. Then we can, it's just an easier way, a more approachable way for them to feel like they are part of the whole plan and they're not just being told to do something. So yeah, I would start by just sort of setting goals as expectations as to what you need them to do. And then, of course, go from there. So you want to set them up for success. So if your child is someone who, is just, if they don't get the work done first, it's never going to get done. They just get distracted and off they go. Yeah. Then I would set them up for success by setting goals around, okay, our goal is to make sure that we get our homework done first before we go outside and play. Maybe that's a disaster with your child. So you have to know what success is for them. If your kid needs to come home and take a mental break from the classroom and learning and all of that kind of stuff and go outside and run around with their friends for an hour, maybe they'd be more productive after dinner. So we have to set them up for success based on who they are as people. And maybe you have one child that is get home, get it done so they don't have to think about it. And then you have another one that needs that breathing space. So you might have to juggle it a little bit. But figuring out what success is for them is a big part of it. And then something I talk a lot about with my clients is understanding why you do what you do. And this can start with kids as well. So even if we're going back to, our expectations or our goals and saying to them, okay, let's have a goal of emptying our backpack every day after school. If we explain to them, the reason we have this goal, why we have this goal is because it helps our home to feel more clean, and mommy and daddy are busy after work, so it helps us to know what needs to get done so we can all do our part to be simplified in our lives, or whatever the why is. But if you kind of set the goal and then finish the whole sentence with a why, the reason you're doing it that way, it helps them understand.
Right.
And I think that is really helpful. And I mean, if you have a child, you know, if they're older maybe, and they're just not into the school thing and they want to be done, and they, you know, they're just, I want to get in the real world, I hate this. Look, our goal right now is to just get you to graduate. And the reason why that's so important is because you're better off getting jobs later on if you have that diploma. Like, it doesn't have to be some complicated, deep thing, but connecting to why we're doing what we're doing, even at an early age, I think is incredibly helpful.
So kind of picking your battles too, right? And setting realistic goals. And
Totally.
Yes.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Actually, it was funny you said that, because I was going to say that too with kids. I think, like my son, he needs to burn off steam, right? So he's no good coming home and doing homework. So I think that's a really interesting point. You've got to learn to know what your kids adjust to, or what's best for them too, right?
Exactly. And you know what, having systems in place, like the stuff that you're talking about in the workshop here, is an awesome start to it. But setting the goals might be something you want to do a week into the first week of school, because it can be overwhelming, even for kids. I remember when my son came home from grade 1, a week into it, everyone got a letter home saying, hey, you may have noticed your child is perhaps moodier or more exhausted after school. And I was like, oh my God, they read my mind. And but apparently that's quite normal when you transition to full day school, that the kids are more exhausted. So it was kind of an interesting reminder for me that, hey, we're all adjusting to this. We're all adjusting to being up at a certain time, getting out the door by a certain time, walking, just all that stuff. So
yes, all that good stuff, right? Yes. So that's good. So like the school year schedule, like you're saying, can be really busy. So you sort of touched on it, but strategies for managing that busy schedule, what sort of things do you suggest?
When it comes to our time, I think the important thing is to sort of chunk it out a little bit. So if it's something we talked a little bit about after school, maybe the first part of after school time is for burning off steam, or maybe it's for homework, or maybe it's for snack. And then there's kind of this second phase that's kind of the preparation for dinner and having the meal. And then there's this space between dinner and bedtime that is for something else. And then, of course, the bedtime routine. So chunking up our time is helpful within a day, but that can also help kind of long term. So this really applies as kids get older and have specific units they're working on, or books they're reading for English class, or tests they're preparing for in math or science and that kind of stuff. But if we kind of look at it like, okay, look, we know that this unit ends on October 1st. So this is our focus. We know that this is something that we need to put time and energy in, and it's just for this period of time, and then we'll move on to the next thing. That's helpful. I also think that when you're looking at the family calendar and stuff, to just sort of take it one period of time and use holidays as a buffer. Okay, so what's it going to take to get us to Thanksgiving? And then what's it going to take us to get to maybe the long weekend in November, or then the Christmas break, and then kind of reset for post Christmas and New Year's and the first part of January. And then we can use things like the Family Day weekend or Easter break, spring break, and then even to May long, and then just kind of finishing out the year. But we kind of have these natural stop points along the way that can be helpful. So we can kind of just create a space in our mind where this is all I'm focusing on right now. And then it helps us to not feel as overwhelmed. I also think it's really important to prioritize what matters most and schedule that. If you guys have a priority as a family for having dinner together, then maybe that goes in everyone's calendar, that we're home between 5:30 and 7, no matter where you are playing, who you're playing with, what activities you sign up for, what volunteering you're doing. We are home at this time. And maybe it's negotiable to a point, maybe it's not. That's up for you and your family to decide. But if we prioritize what's important, it will get done. So I think that's a really really great way to make sure that the right things get done within your schedule. And small tasks too is a good way to do it. Some people aren't necessarily schedule, this half hour for this one for this, but maybe they're more task oriented. And it's like, look, at the end of the day, these are the 5 things that we need to get done as a family this week. Or, Timmy, these are the 3 things you need to do this week. Jasmine, these are the 3 things you need to do this week. Larry, these are the whatever. And just sort of, look, this is what we're responsible for, and not necessarily worrying about when or how, but just that it gets done.
Perfect. Yeah. And just sort of saying, I like how you say put it down into chunks, because kids, time frame, like you say 6 months down the track, that's like forever for them, right? So if you break it down to shorter periods, I think that's helps them kind of keep them engaged too, right? And
exactly. And I know like with how you give people organizing tips and stuff like that, hopefully you're not having a lot of clutter build up if you're organized. The whole point is to not have it. But one of the things I always talk about with clients is that 90-day review. And so I say, every 90 days, go through things and see where you're at. And we talk about it with goals and stuff more specifically, but I think that applies to your spaces as well. So you guys might be writing down amazing tips from this workshop about how you can organize your back closet or paperwork from school or lunches and this kind of stuff. But in 90 days, reset it and go, okay, how is that going? This is how we set it up 90 days ago. Is it still working out for us? Has stuff gathered where it shouldn't? And kind of clean it up a bit, because that helps you in the next 90 days going forward. Or maybe you reset it, when at that Thanksgiving time frame, 45 days in or so. So kind of taking an inventory when you set those stop points is also helpful.
I like that. That's awesome. Because that's something else I was sort of saying too. If it doesn't work, just readjust it, right? Take something out or add something, or I think that's awesome.
And if you don't stop to ask yourself, does this work? It'll just go further down the drain. You'll get further away from it. So if we pause and go, wait, we have this system set up. We liked this and this and this, but this part didn't really work. If you make that adjustment, you'll keep using the system and you'll make it better. But if you just don't address it, it'll just fall back into a pile.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think that's great advice. So we were talking about, everyone has a busy schedule these days. So we were sort of saying, cut out chunks of time. Is that how you're saying we can get time in with our kids? Splitting your evening up, is that kind of the best way to do it?
Absolutely. It's hard, between sports and, practice and friend's house and work and jobs and whatnot. There's a lot of back and forth and busyness within our schedules. So getting that quality time in can be really challenging. And I think sometimes as parents, we can get stuck into this idea that it's about how much time we're spending together. And we almost seem to think that we're lawyers banking hours, and we're not. We're parents. We're parents just trying to teach some morals and values and a few life lessons here and there, and hopefully send good humans into the world at the end of the day. So if we kind of redefine how we're seeing it and see it as the quality time, not the quantity of time, it really helps. So there's great opportunities for us to have quality time with our kids, and driving them around is an awesome opportunity. So instead of having the radio playing or your kids, playing on their phone or watching the DVD or the iPad, turn all of it off and have that conversation with them. And I say to people, be careful with the how was your day question, because it sounds like it's open-ended, but it's not. It's just not with kids, because they're like, fine, good.
Yes, totally.
Wait a second. So try and ask questions like, who did you have lunch with today? Or who did you play with at recess? How did you find the math test? Or what book are you reading in English class?
Right.
Different things like that. What are you looking forward to at practice? Have you guys picked a song for the year-end recital? More specific questions. And then as you ask those questions, their answers will kind of get other questions flowing, and the conversation will start to happen.
Right.
which is, really what you're trying to achieve, and you want to connect with them and understand what they're going through. So I think it's a really good opportunity to chat with our kids in the car when we're driving. And it's maybe not a long drive, it's maybe only 5 or 10 minutes, but the quality of the conversation you could have could be really great and really create that open dialogue for you as a family. Dinner time is another great time. It can be hard for families though. Sometimes dinner time is a drive-through situation, or at the hockey rink, one of your kids is eating with you in the stands and you'll feed the other one on the way home, or whatever the case may be. But you could still find time to have a good conversation there. And maybe you associate certain questions with dinner. So what was the best part of your day? What was the most challenging part of your day? And whether you're in the car in a drive-through grabbing dinner, or whether you've ordered pizza and you're sitting around the island because you barely have time to eat, or you've actually set the table, you can ask those questions no matter what. And it kind of keeps that consistency, and it just sort of sets that tone for, we connect as a family for our meals. We might not sit down at the dinner table every time, but we mentally and emotionally connect with one another. And I think that can be a really great way to connect with our kids. And homework is another good option as well.
Yes.
Depending on the age of your kids, they may or may not need help with their homework. But when they're younger, certainly reading with them, and just having a conversation. What did you think of that book? And not just the story, but what did you think of the drawings? Did you like the way they drew those characters? Or what did you think of the color of her dress? And just stuff where they can share their opinions and their ideas. Or what would you have done differently? And just kind of that few minutes, you're going to read the book, you do your 10 minutes of reading, or 15, whatever you're supposed to do before bed. But just that kind of 2-3 minutes of dialogue afterwards is where the quality comes into it.
So it's kind of like seizing the opportunity, right? I think.
Completely.
And then asking their involvement, I think that makes them feel more involved too, right? So they feel part of it, and you're not just kind of getting them to read, it's done, and it feels more like quality time, like you said, right?
Exactly. And it says to them, look, I care about what you think, and I care about your opinions, whether you're 6 or 16, I care. And when we ask them when they're 6 about their opinions and their thoughts on stuff, it creates this groundwork that as they get older, they'll know that we do care about their opinion. Because I think sometimes that can be the struggle, where kids think, mom and dad are just like, this is the rules, I'm the mom. And they don't care about what the teenager thinks, that they don't care how they feel. But that's not true. We do. And it creates an open dialogue. And, when things get more difficult as kids get older, or conversations get more difficult, there's kind of this nice open dialogue that has been worked on for years and has that build up within the two of you already.
I like that. That is really awesome, actually. I never really thought about that, because I never really had that dialogue with my parents, and you can notice it, right? Because it was more of the strict kind of, don't really talk, just do kind of thing. So I think that's really interesting. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Just another quick question. Sorry, just going back to setting goals. What do you think about offering rewards for that goal system? Like, even if it's just simple things, are right? Do you suggest that, or not really?
Just personally, I structure the reward system based on how's it going to be when they're an adult. So when it comes to stuff like put your stuff in the dishwasher, you're not getting the gold star for that, because you're going to be someone's roommate at some point, probably, whether it's, a romantic partner, or, roommates in college or whatever. And they're not going to give you a gold star for putting the dishes in the dishwasher.
Yes.
So my thought process is, when it comes to things like that, where it's about contributing to the household and to, society in general, you know what, we all have to do our part, and we're all part of a team. We all give it where we can. But when it's something where it's kind of above and beyond, that I wouldn't necessarily expect them to do, then sure, there can be a reward system or allowance or whatever. But I think that's dependent on the structure of your home and your kid and their behavior and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, some kids might be more forthcoming with that, where sometimes it's an opportunity to say, look, I know you hate taking out the garbage and collecting it. And, you know, you don't necessarily have to do that. That's something that mom or dad typically takes care of. But sometimes you have to do the thing you don't like if you want the reward that you desire. And that can be a good life lesson for them too. So I just sort of look at it like, what's the ultimate lesson that can be taught here? If you know what, yeah, we're all going to have to take garbage at some point. You could say that's the same as the dishwasher. And yes, it is to some degree. So maybe it falls in that category. But maybe it's one of those things where you can say to them, look, I know you dislike this, and there are going to be things in life that you dislike. Yes. But sometimes you just got to do it. Or sometimes when you put in the work, you can get something back for it. So it just depends on the circumstances, I think. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer.
No.
I also think that kids are all different. And some kids thrive on a reward system, and that's the best way to get the message across from them. And other kids don't even care. So.
Not so much, right? Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a big reward. It could be just simply rewarding them with an outing with the family. But no, thank you for that. I was just curious to touch base on that when we were talking about goals. So
yeah. And I think too, if they know, that's why I think I mentioned earlier about connecting to your why. And I think that's important with the kids, because the why might be a reward in the beginning. It might be the ability to pick the show that the family watches that night, or to choose the restaurant for dinner, or whatever. And that might be the why initially. The reward is the why. But at some point, we want them to get a bit deeper than that. And we want them to know that, you know, the cookie isn't the only why for why we do things, because we do have to contribute to our homes and our communities and to society. And we, you know, if you want to have that nice car, then you're going to have to work for the money to pay for the nice car.
Right, totally.
So it's kind of a lead into understanding the why. And if it starts with reward, really easy place to start, and then you can build up.
Perfect. I like that. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. I think that's been really interesting information, and I know for sure people will find a lot of use for that, because it's always a struggle trying to set goals for kids and trying to find time for your family in our busy schedules. So I really appreciate that. Is there anything else you wanted to add to it, Michelle?
The one thing I would say is, when it comes to setting goals with kids, is I talked about kind of creating our expectations as goals, but when we're getting to a point where it's goals for their, you know, actions or output, we need to involve them in that too. They need to have some stake in the setting of the goal. You know, my kids did this last year in school, like their teachers did this, or my son did anyways. And the kids wrote out, like, what do they want to achieve by the end of the next semester based on what they'd achieved the first semester. And it made them accountable for the actions that they took. So I think when it comes to goal setting with kids, there's a point in life where it's like, this is the goal I've set for you, and you're going to do it.
Yes.
But then it comes to a point where they need to be involved in it. And I think it's a percentage ratio. Like when they're younger, it's probably 90% you, 10% them. And then as time goes on, it's more 50-50. And then they become a grown adult, and it's 100% their responsibility to set the goal, and you've sent them on their way.
Yeah, you're free.
Exactly. So yeah, I would just say to make sure you involve the kids in that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a really big message that you're sending out there, actually, is involving the kids, like not just talking to them and being told. And I think that's really important, and it helps create that family, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. And thank you so much for your time. And,
absolutely.
Yeah, so I said earlier where everybody can find you if they need. We can post your link in the comments once I upload the video.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks.